All right, Magic Makers. Today I have a gentleman on the podcast. He's probably the third or fourth gentleman I have. And if I bring a dude on here, he knows his stuff. So buckle up, sisters. I have Justin Nault here, and he is the founder of Clovis. And one of the things when he reached out to me, one of my core values is freedom. So he sends me this request to be on the show. And he said, I'm all about creating freedom around food. And I'm like, freedom? All right, let me read on. He had me at hello, as they said in that movie. And so I really like his vibe. He's all about how do we break free of diet culture? How do we stop with the societal, yes, I can speak English, the societal norms. And he's created a whole company around this, his whole movement around this. And I am so excited to dive in. Justin, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me here. I'm really excited.
Yeah, and I'm it's serious. Like one of my big core philosophies is freedom. I spent a lot of time in corporate and there was no freedom. Like you either did or you didn't do, right? So
Yeah.
I really love how you're redefining what freedom looks like in health. And how did you come to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I love that you come from the corporate world because I work so much in that. A lot of the speaking events I do are usually for either entrepreneurs or very large businesses, or I'm talking on health panels and things for people that are trying to manage health and wellness along with that kind of hustle and grind of
Mm.
corporate life or entrepreneurship. And for me, it was interesting because from the time I was very young, I rejected that. I was like, I will not have a 9 to 5. I will be different. And, I had a 2.8 GPA in high school and I just like was not having like corporate anything. And I went to music school. I went to Berklee College of Music in Boston and I got a degree in songwriting. And then I moved down to Nashville. And before I knew it, I was playing piano and singing and I was performing over 300 shows a year. And I had a 15-year music career. I had a reality TV show on ABC by the time I was 25. I had a YouTube channel that was running. My music was in movies and TV shows. And it was like this kind of living the dream type
Mm.
situation according to other people's standards.
Right,
Right?
right.
When I was in it, it didn't take me long to realize, like, oh, I'm working a 9 to 5. It just starts at 8 p.m.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
I had
Exactly.
locked myself in this situation where I was essentially a graveyard shift worker. And
Yeah.
like, we get into biochemistry and metabolic health and everything. There's really nothing worse than graveyard shifts, you
No,
know?
nothing worth it worse. Or when the people switch back and forth, where they do graveyard and then they do the opening shift. And I'm like, how do you only give yourself 2 days to do that?
I know, I know. This is a total side note, and I can get back to that. But I've found in the Clovis Academy is my private Facebook group. We have like over 11,000 members in there. So many of them are nurses
Yes.
because nurses do 12 hours on, 12 hours off, 12. And in their mind, they're like, I get 4 days off per week. But
Right.
that 3 days is crushing them metabolically.
It questioned them because they're going from like the 11 to 7 shift. They have 48 hours, maybe 30, 72 hours to flip to the daytime. And I'm like, how?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And that's what I found is especially when I started Clovis in my late 20s when I was still performing, so I was actually waking up at 7 a.m. after getting off stage at 3 a.m., sleep a few hours, and I would take modafinil to get through. Well, nootropics will get me through. This will be great. It's like,
Exactly. All
ugh,
I need
and
is a supplement. It's magic.
exactly, right, right, right. My body can produce energy from nothing. Cool. It's just like, let me destroy all of my muscle mass. Great. But no, I mean, for me, I was born in 86. So the term that I use, I hate this term and I say it because it's emotionally triggering for me and for other people listening. But like in the early 90s, like when you were what I was in the world, it was like we were called fat kids, you
Yes.
know?
Yeah.
And I was a fat kid and I went into high school. I was five
And
foot
people
two. I
talked about it. It wasn't this like whisper thing, it was to your
totally.
face.
Oh yeah, 100%. I remember my brother's friends, they'd lift my shirt up and just slap my belly. And I'm like, oh God. And so I grew up just really hating my body.
Mm.
And around that time was the time of the mega action stars, this whole
Yeah.
action movie craze of Arnold Schwarzenegger and
And
Sylvester
everyone had
Stallone.
a six pack and they were ripped and
Oh yeah. So I mean, 15 years old, I'm reading Muscle and Fitness magazine, taking creatine. I'm lifting weights 2 hours a day, right? And I've now had a 20-year fitness career that's been amazing, very enjoyable, amazing in a lot of ways. And I also absolutely masochistically punished myself for
oh,
over a decade because I hated my body. Yeah, right. Exactly, right.
a
And
lot
it
of
takes
people are
us,
nodding.
yeah, yeah, and it takes us so long. I would say like my last 10 years has been a journey of self-love and getting
Yes.
to a place of only doing fitness that I enjoy, only doing fitness that
Mm.
feels good, because I love myself, not because I need myself to
Yes.
change, And what ended up happening is, the reason why I say I don't know why this is. The universe just gives us what it gives us, But I ended up in this situation where my teenage years, I had tremendous body dysmorphia and a lot of insecurities. And I chose a career that put me literally under spotlights every night in perpetuity. You know? So it just was like it was playing these gigs till hours of the night and then training for 2 hours a day. I mean, I was doing CrossFit 2 a days. I'm a purple belt in jujitsu. I was a boxer. I did Olympic lifting. I was deadlifting 425 pounds. For what reason? I don't know. Ego.
Right.
It was, certainly wasn't good for my metabolism. But I was just raised no pain, no gain. You force your body to change. Yeah, there we go. Right. And I had this strange situation that most men don't have where, the term I used for it was I was kind of the hot girl in the bar. I was being judged on my appearance. I was being pursued by sexual interests, right? People coming after me for this thing and projecting on me based on my appearance or whatever. And I never got my body where I wanted it to be through fitness. And in my late 20s, I found the paleo diet. And I did my first paleo reset and I started dropping body fat quite effortlessly. And I was like, oh, okay, there's something to this, what I now call the concept of food versus poison.
Right.
And around that same time, my niece was born, and she was having. I had actually just became a nutritional therapist. I did that as a hobby. I was like, I'm going to
Mm.
become a nutritional therapist. I'm going to learn about epigenetics, and I'm going to be a client of one. I am my own client. I was
Right,
just
right.
obsessed, you know. And right around that time, again, universally, my niece was born. She was having over 300 seizures a day.
Ooh.
So within her first 7 days of life, she was put in the pediatric ICU. She was hooked up to all these machines. They did over $1 million in testing. And these were like burst depression seizures or what's called grand mal seizures. So she
Mm.
would seize up and then flatline.
Oof.
And she'd sometimes turn purple before she would breathe again
Oh,
and come
how
back. It was
scary for
really,
your family.
yeah. So she was given less than 3 years to live. And they eventually installed a G tube in her stomach. They just put a little hole in the belly and they feed the child through a tube. And I didn't know this at the time. My first introduction to the ketogenic diet was through mainstream medicine, where they
Huh.
used the ketogenic diet to suppress seizures in
Yeah.
epileptic. So they tried this as a last ditch effort on Savannah, and they do this with a formula called KetoCal, and it's made by Gerber. Gerber's owned by Nestle. Our tax dollars put it in these pediatric ICUs, and I knew just enough to be a little annoying to doctors at that point. And I checked the ingredients on this KetoCal, and it was high fat, low carb, so technically keto, but it was like 100% hydrogenated vegetable oils and like
Yes.
artificial flavorings and sweeteners.
Mm.
All of the vitamins, like B vitamins, they're not using methylated B vitamins. They're using synthetic versions like folic acid and stuff like that, right? So I brought it to the attention of the neurologist. He looks me dead in the face and he goes, "Huh, I never thought to check that."
Yeah.
And it was game over for me. That's like where the company comes from. I made a baby formula for Savannah in my kitchen using food dehydrators and food processors. That actually became the first product I ever launched on the internet. It was called the Perfect Paleo Powder. It was kind of a version of this baby formula that I sold as a protein powder superfood. And I just got on Facebook and I started sharing with people what I had learned. I realized it was like my red pill matrix moment. I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
nobody's coming to save me. I have to figure this out. And I started buying biochemistry and biology textbooks. I started studying human metabolism during my free times during the day when I wasn't playing gigs. And I started sharing that on Facebook Live. And those shares started around 8 years ago. And here I am with you now. Thousands of transformations later, people have Clovis tattooed on their skin because the transformations have been so profound.
Yeah, you're right. Like you nailed on the head. No one's coming to save you. And I feel like for many of us, I went to my doctor told me whatever my doctor told me, or I see seniors and they're prescribed Boost
Yeah.
or Ensure. And I'm
Yeah.
like, read the back of that freaking bottle. Like
I
half
know.
of that stuff is crap.
Yeah. a
And
hundred
I'm
percent.
like, there are, and I get why they want them to have that in there, but there are plenty of other products out there that don't contain crap, taste like chocolate.
Of course, of course. So the question becomes, right? Why are the people with the highest credentials in lab coats, why are they recommending the one that is crap when there are so many good options out there? And that's really the rabbit holes that I was led down and,
Yeah.
realizing mainstream medicine is the third leading cause of death in America. It's a really scary situation we found ourselves in.
And it's sad because like everyone has a doctor, right? For the most
Yeah.
part, and they just are inundated with so many things that they have to know. So it's like I don't want to trash them, but at the same
No.
time, they're only presented with what they're presented with. It's
Yeah.
like the handful of doctors that do lift their head up and be like, hang on, I did read the back of this, and no, this is crap. But
Hmm.
it's the most people are like, a colleague told me about Boost, so I'm just going to recommend it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. or what's called standard of care. Even
Yeah.
even in like I don't think people realize this with medical license, where like you may have a doctor that says, okay, standard of care for diabetes or type 2 diabetes, let's say, is actually going to make things worse over time, but I have to prescribe it because if I
Right.
don't, I lose my license.
Right.
Right. So I always say that same thing that you just said. Like I never want to trash doctors. A lot of people think, I think through my content, they think that I'm anti-doctor. I'm not. I'm anti the education that doctors get. I think they're very good people that are absolutely like that neurologist. We spent months with him. He's watching
Right.
my niece die and he cared, right? He
Right.
was trying to help us.
Right.
So that moment was not like, oh, screw this guy. It was like, wait, how is this possible? This baby could not be a more fragile human life and it's being poisoned. How did this happen? It's not blaming that one individual.
Right. And I love that moment that you had where you're like, I'm no longer working out in a punishing way.
Mhm.
I'm working out for self-love. And and I think for a lot of us, we have that kind of come to Jesus moment. And I always ask the question, it's like, do you remember when that like, holy moly, like this,
Mm.
that like kind of like that light bulb, the coconut to the head moment happened?
100%. Yeah. And, I always preface this by saying nobody's path needs to look like mine. I will
Right.
tell you as exactly how I got here. I have a no lying policy in my life. I'm 100% transparent. So I remember the specific moment that happened. And it was at around age 26, 27. I started hearing about psychedelics, about
Mm.
ayahuasca and mushrooms and all these things. And I studied it for a full year and a half, just anything I could get my hands on. I was terrified of it and I'm studying it, but I was like deeply intrigued. And the first psychedelic experience I ever had was I got myself to the Peruvian jungle
Oh yeah.
and I did ayahuasca. I had 4 ceremonies over 8 days and I had never tried mushrooms, anything in the past. So I,
Hmm.
I like went to Mount Everest first. And when I came back from that trip, I was still doing 2 a day CrossFit workouts. And I remember specifically I was doing thrusters for time with a barbell. And I just like put it down on one rep. And I looked at the weights on the floor and I'm sweating and I'm huffing and puffing. And it hit me like a drop kick. I was just like, this is not good for me. And in the middle of the WOD, the whole class is going on. I put my weights away, I put the barbell away, and I walked out and I never went to CrossFit again. It was my
Mm.
last CrossFit class ever. And I was like, this is crazy. I mean, I'm having joint pains. I'm sore all the time. I have nagging injuries from when I was deadlifting 400 pounds for no reason, right? And that was the moment. I put a heavy focus into mobility and some
Mm.
calisthenics training. I started working with coaches that really were doing like functional movement.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
was
yeah.
started doing my workouts outside with my bare feet in the grass.
Mm.
But that was really the pivotal moment for me. A lot changed then because of that experience that I had. I left CrossFit. I left a relationship that wasn't serving me. And I realized I was like, I need to go all in on this health and wellness thing. Like this is going to, the situation with my niece was obviously still happening. And, Savannah's still alive today. She's 10 years old. She's 100% disabled. But, it was a very transformative time in my life. And I don't know. I can't explain why that was the catalyst, but it had never been more clear. And I walked out of that gym and I knew I'm never going back to this.
Yeah, and I feel like I said, everyone's path is different and everyone has their like that, light moment, and you
Yeah.
never know when it's going to come. And as we're talking about this, I'm always kind of trying to understand like how, can people like us help people shift that mindset to kind of start to embrace that like it's not the 2 a days anymore. It's,
Mm.
can I do this in a sustainable fashion versus
Yeah.
constantly chasing that 400-pound PR, chasing that like whatever, if you're a runner, chasing that like 2-minute mile,
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
do we kind of start to help people like get that shift?
Yeah, I think I have developed a lot of exercises to do this, right? So, like, anytime someone comes into one of my programs, the very first thing that they get is called daily mirror work. And I'm going
Mm,
to ask them to stand in front of a mirror, look themselves in the eyes, and out loud say, I love you to
wow.
yourself 10 times and really try to mean it, And like, I don't care if it's fake it till you make it at first. It's like
Yes.
bicep curls, right? You
Yeah.
want bigger bicep curls, you got to do the reps. You got to curl,
Mhm.
And with self love, I treat it just like that. I come up with all these exercises that are really small little baby steps that we can repeat every day to actually build the muscle of self love. And believe it or not, I run custom nutrition plans with macros and all these things, and we'll be 60 days in, and people will be crushing it. They're eating what they're supposed to eat and everything, and then I ask them about mirror work.
And it's
Yeah,
like,
it's the biggest. I tried it once. My face got red. I felt so weird. I ran out of the bathroom. Some women do it the first time. They get to "I love you" number 3, and they're a ball of tears. They're just
right,
crying.
exactly.
And it's helping them see like you're alone in a room. There's
Mm,
nobody around to be embarrassed by. There's no other opinions of what you're doing. You're so uncomfortable with self
yeah.
that this is a full-blown self-rejection that you're dealing with. And it's what you said about masochistic exercise, right? When that light bulb moment goes off. I try to help people see when I come in with an approved foods list and I say, hey, we are adopting food versus poison. If it's not species appropriate food, it's poison and we don't eat it. It becomes this change of like, let's say someone's drinking 10 Coca-Colas a day. They can have the mindset of like, oh, this Justin guy, here's another nutritional therapist telling me that I can't have my favorite food. Getting healthy sucks. This, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, yeah.
Or we can shift the internal dialogue to I love myself so much that I would
Right.
never knowingly poison myself.
Right.
That's a much different place to operate from. And that's just one exercise. I have a zillion exercises that I walk people through to help them change the way they view themselves in the world.
And it's you're right because I think that I like that approach because as you think about it, most people get this like don't do list.
Mhm.
And they, are more like, he sucks because I no longer, whatever your thing is, I can no longer do. But when I'm
Yeah.
starting to kind of put it from a me focused,
Mhm.
and it's like, is this helping me or hurting me focus? Then
Yeah.
you can start to be like, oh, okay, like, do I really need 20 Cokes? Maybe I can get by on five. And then
Totally.
eventually it's none.
Well, and that's I love that you brought that up because it's January. It's New Year's resolution time,
Yes.
right? And I try to help people see that one of the number one red flag dead giveaways of low self-worth is self-sabotage,
Mm,
right? So what a lot of people will do is this sort of binary, it's like yes or no. It's like, okay, December 31st, I've not been to the gym in a year. I'm eating a lot of junk food. I'm drinking 10 Pepsis a day. New Year's resolution, I'm going to eat 1,200 calories a day. I'm going to go to the
right.
gym 5 days a
Uh-huh.
week. I'm going to do cardio. I'm going to do resistance training. They're 2.5 weeks in. They feel like they're going to die. They say this sucks. Getting healthy sucks. So they're cementing the false belief they already have that they are going to fail, and they're cementing the false belief they already have that the process of getting healthy sucks.
Yeah.
So they're setting themselves up for failure. And when I have people do daily commitment work, which is part of daily mirror work, I'm like, listen, you have to have self awareness here and meet yourself where you are. One of the fastest ways to build self worth is to make a commitment to yourself and keep it.
Yes.
So if that commitment is I'm going to go from no gym days to 5 days a week, you're not going to do that. You're going to break a commitment to yourself. You're going to diminish your own self worth. So for some people, the commitment can be as small as you look in the mirror and say, I commit to you that for the next 3 days. That's it. For the next 3 days, I'm going to start my day with a glass of water.
Yep.
And then day three, you think you drink that third glass of water, you put your hands in the air, you say, I did it. I kept a commitment to myself. Amazing. Now I'm going to commit that I'm going to do that every day for the next 7 days. Or I commit that once per day, I'm going to go for a 10-minute walk. So if I can get people to look at health and wellness through the lens of the rest of their life, not how much diet and fitness can I pack into 3 weeks, get amazing results, and then go back to what I was doing, right? Which is where the weight loss roller coaster up and down comes from. We have to meet ourselves where we are if we really love ourselves.
And as you mentioned, that's the hardest part where, I don't care if it's New Year's or June 1st, everyone wakes up and they're like, Monday's the day, and I need to be what I wasn't yesterday, but I'm going to do all these 30 things. And I'm like, take a look at your 30, what feels easy?
Yeah.
And we, diet culture tells us that like I got to do the whole stack. And if I don't do the
Mhm.
whole stack, I'm not
Yeah.
going to get any results, or the results I'm going to get are going to be shit.
Right.
Versus looking at the stack and being like, what feels easy? And then you get, you start to be like, oh, I had that glass of water. Wasn't so bad. Maybe tomorrow
Totally.
I'll have two, or maybe next week I'll try two.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And that's where we shift the lens and we say, okay, like if something is actually healthy for you, it should feel good. Like getting healthy shouldn't suck. Now,
Yes.
we can talk about down the line when you start to decide, I'm going to test myself. I'm going to do some fitness because I'm interested in the challenge, or like I train jujitsu, right? Like training jujitsu is very difficult, it's very challenging, but it actually does make me feel good, you know?
Right.
So when we can look at things through that lens and understand that in the beginning, day one, the things that make you feel good are going to feel very different from the things that make you feel good on day 120,
Exactly.
as long as we're consistently stepping toward the progress that we want to make. I always say that the goal is always improvement, never perfection.
Right. And how I love that one because you're right. A lot of my ladies, I'm calling you out right now. A lot of my ladies are perfectionists, that if
Mm.
they try something one time, two times, and they don't nail it,
Mhm.
Kim, I got to try something else. This doesn't work.
Mm.
And you're like, okay, but you got like 60%. So let's keep going because I know that the breakthrough is there. I can't promise you if it's next week or next month,
Right.
but I know that you're on the path.
Yeah, you're making a commitment to the journey. And I have there's a video lesson in one of my courses, my custom metabolism reset. It's called Self-sabotage, the pattern within the pattern. And the number one form of self-sabotage that I see, which is self-sabotage, that may feel like a gut punch to some people, is the illusion of perfectionism.
Yes.
You're using perfectionism as an avoidance pattern. If I can't get it 100% right, I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to stay here and I'm going to eat chips and drink Coca-Cola and not go to the gym because so it's the idea that you're not taking action because of perfectionism is a false belief. It's a self-sabotage behavioral pattern.
Yeah. And it's I kind of look at it as like a mindset of like I liken it to like GPS. Have you heard of the app Waze?
Yeah.
So Austin has crappy traffic. I've been stuck in it, so you're familiar with that.
Yeah.
So I like to say that people who are like get stuck in this kind of like it has to be a certain way mindset. It's like I'm driving with Waze, and we usually put Waze, and we know where we're going, but we're like, is there a faster way? And then some
Yep.
people like Waze is like, hey, make a right turn here, and I've never made that right turn.
Yeah.
And some people are like, do I make the right turn or do I just
Mhm.
stick in this crappy traffic?
Yeah.
And other people, the people who are like, I'm making the right turn, I'm not going to be done in the traffic. Versus the person
Mhm.
like, I know this is going to suck, but I know what's going to happen. I know what it's like to be stuck in traffic versus what it's like to be like clear of the traffic. And so I like
Totally.
whenever I start to break it down to for that to my ladies, they're like, oh. So I was like, if Waze pops up a different exit, do you go?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, this is it. And if someone says yes, I'm like, this is the different exit I'm giving you.
Yep. 100%. I love that. That's a great analogy. And I think about it too, just in terms of like people end up operating on autopilot. So
Yes.
one of the sort of controversial opinions I guess I have is I think one of the number one reasons for the health crisis that we have in America is people are not living lives that are
No.
aligned with who they want to be.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yep.
So the way I describe it to any client, male or female, when they first come in, if I'm like, hey, listen, if you are, in a toxic romantic relationship, if you are waking up to an alarm clock, exhausted every day, and you're driving to a job that you hate in traffic, and then you're driving home from a job you hate in traffic, and you pull into the Wendy's drive-through and you get a chocolate frosty, like if your first bite of frosty is the very best part of your day, I'm going to have a very hard time competing with that
Right.
because we have to look at your holistic life and we need to find all the ways in which you've said yes to things that were not in alignment with you and all the ways you've self-betrayed and people pleased and put other people's opinions or the idea of the things you should do
Mm,
ahead of your own internal authenticity. We have to break free from all of those prison cells if we want to achieve a life of fully optimal health and wellness. So I
right.
think there's another false belief that's like, well, if I lose 100 pounds, then I'll be happy and
Ah,
then I'll be healthy.
exactly.
Where like I try to help people see like the decision to become a healthy person is a light switch decision, right?
Yes.
It's like me walking out of the CrossFit gym. So you decide, I am now a healthy person. I will live my life as a healthy person. And then over time, as a result, you will manifest health and wellness because of the identity shift you had, not the other way around.
Right. And you're right. It has to become your identity. And if you think about, CrossFitters,
Mhm.
you could be in a room with 20 people and someone will be like, "Oh yeah, I do CrossFit." Like because that's their identity or the diet. I'm keto, I'm paleo,
Mhm.
I'm vegan and that's my identity.
Yeah.
Where I think most people don't say I'm a dieter. Like
Right.
that's their identity, but it's not like, hey, I'm Kim, I'm a yo-yo dieter. Like it's not something we
Yeah.
raise our
Yeah.
hand and say.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that's like dieting is almost even the term dieting, right? The reason I say like it's a light switch decision to become a healthy person is like dieting is shameful.
Hmm.
It carries this weight of shame. And like I had a reel the other day that just got a ton of questions and messages coming in from me because I said, listen, you have to audit your social circle. It's a very
Yes.
quick filter for who loves you when you're trying to make healthy decisions. If you're at a restaurant and you skip the bread or you don't order a margarita at happy hour, and everyone around you starts teasing you and making fun of you, or like, oh, you're trying
Hmm.
another diet. What's this one? Is it going to be like the last one? And it's like,
Right.
yo. So one, we need to learn healthy boundary setting. Like, listen, I love all of you people, and you're
Right.
perfect exactly as you are, and I don't care what you're eating or what you're drinking. It doesn't matter to me.
Right.
But I'm actually only here for you to support me.
Right.
And if you're going to throw this negativity at me, I'm not going to spend time around you. It's really that simple, you know? And I got asked a question on a podcast yesterday that I have never been asked before, which was like, all right, this will like stop me in my tracks. I'm like sitting there, I'm like, whoa, this is a really good
Now I'm
question.
intrigued.
Yeah, she asked me, she said, well, if we're talking so much about self-love, and I was explaining when I was in the music industry, I was obsessed with external validation and other people's
Hmm.
opinions. I really love myself. And she's like, well, if you love yourself now, she's like, what does it feel like when you actually love
Ooh.
yourself?
Oh,
I
yeah.
had your response, right? I was like, oh, how do I answer that? And it kind of reminded me of psychedelics. It's like, how do I explain to somebody what psychedelics are like? I can't describe this in words. You
Yeah.
just have to experience it. So what I finally landed on after sitting there for like 2 minutes, just blankly, I was like, the moment you love yourself is the moment you stop getting triggered by other people's opinions of what you're doing.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I realized that most people wake up every day, from their clothes to how they show up at work to what diet they're on to what fitness plan they're doing to what political party they vote for and anything in between. They're living their life dictated by how other people will respond to what they're doing. And I've adopted a place, the health and wellness space on social media can be extremely toxic. There's so much fighting and negativity and
Oh
people
God, yeah.
stitching videos, debates, and all this stuff. And I realized that I just got into a place where I don't have to make anybody else wrong for me
Mm,
to know that I'm right,
yes.
you know? And that's really it. It's like if you find yourself all throughout the day constantly concerned with what other people are thinking of you, we're dealing with low self-worth and low self-love, assuredly.
And when what you described, it's like spot on the head. And I was like, I couldn't have articulated it, but it's like, yeah, that's where you get to the point where you're like, you're no longer a desperate dieter, you're no longer chasing whatever it is that you're chasing. You
Mhm.
finally just have that peace, that like
Yeah.
that inner calm. And earlier this year, when you know how everyone comes up with their word, someone came up with a word that I thought was just like describe what you just said, unbothered.
Yeah.
Like
Totally.
you're just unbothered, you're untethered to anything. You're just moving in your own space.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah, there's a term I use for it, but I won't use profanity on your show because I
You can
didn't
use
ask permission.
profanity. I'm a fan of it.
Yeah, I call it unfuckwithable,
Yeah, exactly. Like when
you
you get
know?
to the zero fuck zone, like you are like bulletproof. Like
Yeah.
nothing bothers you.
Totally. And the thing is like I when we use the term unfuckwithable, it sounds aggressive, right? So for example, like I'm a purple belt in jujitsu, right? Which means I can handle 95% of the free world in physical hand-to-hand combat, right? But I'm a 38-year-old man. If I'm in a social setting and some 20-year-old kid is popping off, this kid could literally spit in my face. And I would be like, oh, wow, this guy is going through something really
Right.
intense. Whoa, okay, like I look at my fiance, hey, we got to get out of here. This place is not for us. I
Yeah.
have nothing to prove to that kid.
No.
It doesn't make me more secure in myself to choke this kid out. I would never do that. I would never
Right.
do that. Right. So, like the unfuck with a bull thing, it's like, I mean, just live your own life and do your own thing, and how other people respond to you, it's really not, it's the idea of like other people's opinions of me is none of my business.
Right.
Like just
It is. It completely is.
yeah.
And what you just said about my circle, it's very challenging for a lot of my women, especially because, these are people who've probably been friends of yours for a long time,
Yeah.
and I know that when I first started on my health journey, I would stop drinking for 6 months while I was doing fitness competitions,
Mhm.
and it made other people uncomfortable. And
Yeah.
it's and it was like, as I'm kind of going through this, I'm like, why does it make you uncomfortable that I'm not having a drink? I'm not saying you
Mhm.
can't. I'm not
Sure.
saying you can't do, you can do whatever the hell you want. I'm just here because I want to be with Justin. I'm not here because I'm here for the drinks.
Yeah.
And you're right. Like, or the people who are like, well, what's just one glass? And for
Exactly.
me at the time, one glass turned into other things.
Sure. Same.
Now I didn't understand that. I was like, who could just have a glass of wine? And now I'm like, I'm
Yeah.
that person who can.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And that's like the same thing with this experience I just said. If this person spat at me or something, right? I'd be like, "Whoa, this person is having their own internal experience that is clearly very intense."
Right.
It's the same with your friends. right? When you say no to a glass of wine and they say, well, what's just one glass? They're trying to validate their own decision to themselves, right?
Right.
So they're insecure about their decision. And I always use, when I use the term food versus poison, it's triggering on purpose. I'm doing that on purpose
Yeah.
so people pay attention, right? We're like, if we take anybody in the world who's ever tried dieting or anything, and I make you choose, I'm going to give you two foods, and only one can be labeled poison, and only one can be labeled food, and you have to choose. And one food is grass fed steak, and the other is strawberry Pop Tarts, right? Like, nobody gets that wrong.
Right.
Okay, the steak is food and the Pop Tarts are poison. So we know, people know. They
Oh
know
yeah.
what is good for them and what isn't good for them. So what's happening in these social settings, if I order it a certain way at a restaurant or I forego alcohol or whatever, inadvertently, I'm taking a giant spotlight and I'm shining it on all of their decisions.
Right.
So they're having an internal experience. I try to meet them with empathy in that, where it's like, I don't have to justify my decisions to you. And if that kind of thing starts coming my way, it's just like, hey, listen, you're free to do whatever you want. Like, make your decisions. It's okay. I'm happy with what you're doing. I'm happy with what I'm doing,
Right.
you know? But I call it a pressure release valve. They're
Mm.
feeling a buildup of emotional tension in themselves because they're like, oh, I'm choosing alcohol again. And they're not choosing, oh, am I doing this right? Right. And they have to comment on your experience because it's a pressure release valve.
Yeah. And as you and I have evolved over time, you see it and you're just like you just kind of like let it roll off your back, where I know for many people listening that still is a trigger for them to be like, well, maybe I should have a drink, or you know because I don't want to avoid because they're my friends.
Of course, totally. Well, and what that is, right, is like there are really two. Well, there's actually one primary incentive in life, period, and that is love.
Yeah.
And this takes us back to childhood trauma or like Jungian depth psychology of like where ego shadow comes into play. Like
Mm,
as a child, you need love or you die.
right.
If someone doesn't care for you and love you, you need food, shelter, love, protection. You require all those things. So we learn when we're young children certain behaviors get us more love. That ends up in our ego. Certain behaviors take love away. They make mom and dad mad. So
Right.
those behaviors end up in our shadow. And then this follows us all through life. We're all just little kids in grown up bodies, right? So what you're saying is, well, some women will, or men will self betray and say, I'm going to have the drink because I don't want to ruffle feathers in my friend group, because
Right.
I want to be accepted, because I want to be loved.
Mm,
So the incentive in the positive is I want more love. The incentive in the negative is I'm afraid of losing love.
yeah.
And the idea of losing love is death. Our nervous
Yeah.
system is still a little child nervous
Yep.
system that's like, if these grown-ups don't love me, I'm going to die. Which is why it feels so challenging to make these decisions, to choose yourself, to put your oxygen mask on first, can feel like a life or death situation in your nervous system. It makes people have like panic attacks to go against the grain because they want love and they don't want to lose love.
Yeah, and as you put it down into that primal, you're right that it's also the tribe, right? If I lose the
Yeah.
tribe,
Yeah.
what I'm left alone, and how am I going to get supplies and all the other things without
Yeah.
this tribe of around me? But yeah, that's kind of deep.
It's very, very deep. It's a lot more deep than calories and net carbs. I'll tell you that much.
And and you and I feel for the work you do, the work I do. Yeah, sure, I can talk to you about calories and macros and all that magical stuff, but
Yeah.
we both know that that's just the paint,
Yeah. Yeah.
that we're lifting the hood, and we really have to get into all of the programming that
Yeah.
we were sold. Like you said earlier in the show, you grew up on Muscle and Fitness magazine, right?
Hmm.
And if it was in Muscle and Fitness magazine and so was doing it, you bet your sweet bottom you were doing it, and everybody else was doing it. And the same thing
Totally.
for ladies. Like,
Yeah.
if it was in Shape magazine and I saw that some actress was eating a certain way or working out a certain way, bet your sweet bottom I ripped out those pages, and that's the workout I was doing until the next month came around.
Yep.
And
Yep.
now we're left with the like that was just our like kind of our early education. And now we're left with like we don't know what to do. Like I'm still like, do I stick with the person who brought me the
Hmm.
90s,
Yeah.
the 90s, culture, or do I start the pivot? It's of how you were talking earlier, where you're like, you know what, those punishing workouts, they're not for me anymore. I'm
Yeah.
all about how do I get just strong and how
Yeah.
do I just feel in my body.
Yeah, yeah, of course. And that's when we take a look at it, right? It's like what I've done with my body is quite unnatural. You know, what you were doing with fitness competitions is quite unnatural. If we go back to 1930 strongman competitions and look at pictures, it's like these guys couldn't sell a $17 fitness program on Instagram because
No,
they don't look like they lift, right?
they
So it's
looked kind of pudgy if you look at them.
exactly. So our human brains have been so twisted to go after this sort of like ideal that is not real.
Mm.
You know, if like all of a sudden, like you said, to go back to a tribe, if all of a sudden I'm living amongst an indigenous tribe and there's 100 of us and we're all sharing resources, I don't get to have 135 pounds of muscle on my frame because that's very metabolically expensive. I would be
Yes.
eating the whole tribe's calories to keep this shit on my skeleton. It doesn't make any sense, you
Right. And
know?
people in the tribe would be like, what's going on with him? Why does he get the extra skeleton?
Totally. And they'd be like, why is he over in the corner lifting rocks for no reason? What is he doing over there? That doesn't, this is anti-survival, you know? So this whole system that we have has programmed us to be one way. And the next controversial thought that I have is one of the other biggest issues for the health crisis in America is the illusion of authority.
Yes. Yes.
Most of us came up in public school systems. We're told to sit down, be quiet. If our body says we have to go to the bathroom, we have to raise our hands and ask for permission.
Right.
And someone else can say no, figure it out, hold it, and I have to
Right.
suppress my own body, my own internal feelings. So this idea that you're saying of like people don't know what to do, it's because we've always been programmed that someone else knows better than we do. And this is what I run into with the evidence-based
Mm.
community, right? Like I have a lot of attack from evidence-based people in my content, and the reason for that is because I don't accept their illusion of authority, right? So if a PhD comes to me and says, you don't get to say that seed oils are bad because I have a PhD next to my name and we don't have any long term randomized control trials that show harm in humans. And my response is not to debate. My response is, I actually don't believe in the perceived authority of the entire organization that gave you your credentials. I don't believe in your education. Now, that is my subjective truth, and you
Right.
don't have to accept that. And like I said earlier, I don't have to make you wrong to
Right.
believe that I'm right. So, this idea of taking back your own authority, I don't need a randomized control trial to tell me that I'm not going to consume seed oils. That is a decision that I can make for myself, just like somebody can decide to be vegan, they can decide to be carnivore. They don't need to justify their decision. And if it works for them, it works for them. So the way that I eat has transformed my health and wellness over the last 12 years. It changed the way my brain functions. It changed my relationships. It made me more money. It built the community of my dreams. My life is like a fairy tale.
Mm.
And it's because I make decisions that feel aligned with me and my most authentic self. And I don't care what anybody else thinks about it. And all that I'm doing on my social media is sharing what worked for me and sharing what has now worked for thousands of other people.
You know, that's the shift that I started to make probably like 10 years ago. You know, I was the cookie cutter, like, here's the cookie cutter blueprint, and everyone
Mm.
has the cookie cutter.
Yeah.
And then as I was shifting in my perimenopausal journey, I was just realizing that certain things that worked for me weren't in the cookie cutter anymore. And
Yeah.
other people were having different results. So it's kind of like, I'm going to give you the cookie cutter, but know that it's for me to understand what's happening. And
Yeah.
it's not this like set it and forget it diet, because that's what we were
Yeah.
fed. We were like, I'm going to be paleo for the rest of my life. I'm going to follow whatever diet for the rest of my natural born life. Versus, as you said, like, how do I feel when I eat this food? Like, if I feel
Mhm.
great eating a seed oil, rock on with your bad self. If you don't
Exactly.
feel good with eating a seed oil, take it out and see how you feel. And it's
Yeah.
always like, you're not saying I'm an authority and seed oils suck. You're saying, in my experience, they're not good for me. They're not good for other people that I work with. However, for you, if that seems like something that's going to be in your life, go for it.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think that it's probably similar for you based on our demographics, as we'd call them in like a marketing term, is because I think of myself as I'm the guy that people come to when nothing else has worked.
Yes.
They've talked to all the doctors, they've worked with OBGYNs, and they've worked with autoimmune specialists, and they've done gut cleanses and detoxes and spent thousands of dollars on supplements and red light devices and all the thing, and nothing works. So they come to me, and the first three lessons in my online course are learn, unlearn, relearn.
Mm-hmm.
And all I'm asking, it's like a movie. I'm like, we have suspension of disbelief. For the next 90 minutes of this horror movie, I'm going to just let myself feel this. I know it's not real, but I'm going to let myself feel this. And
Right.
I'm like, listen, you're here with me for 90 days. I'm asking you to wipe the slate clean of everything you think
Mm,
that you know and just go all in and adopt this. If your life transforms, amazing. Continue. If it doesn't, here's your money back. You can go try something else, right? It's like I'm just asking you to attempt a new way of thinking because you're telling me I've tried everything and nothing has worked. So if you've tried all these other diet programs and all these other things, and let's say you've been consuming seed oils all along the way, then what is it going to harm you to cut them out and see what happens?
yeah. And I think as you know, as you kind of talked about this earlier, it's the authority, right? Some authority. And I've probably been following a rule for so long that I can't even tell you who gave me the rule, but I've been following it for so long, and that
Yeah.
you're kind of like blowing my worlds up right now.
Yeah.
You're like, you're pretty much telling me that the earth is flat by telling me that adopting a few different things.
Exactly. Exactly. And think about it, like if somebody comes to me and they're a flat earther and they're talking to me about how the earth is flat, why would I be invested in changing their mind? If they seem happy and they're living their life by that, right? They're still a human. They got to put their pants on and go to the bathroom and eat food. They may believe the earth is flat. That impacts me exactly none. And they're also not harming anybody with that, right?
Right.
So it's this kind of subjective truth, this subjective reality thing is very important. It's important to understand that you can adopt whatever you want to adopt, which takes us back to the reason why people get so in their I am correct, I am the authority, I'm now online telling you that all these other people are quacks and idiots. I would only do that if I am insecure in my own beliefs and I care very much what other people think about me.
Mm,
You see what I mean?
yeah. Yeah. So this is I love people who make me think. Like you've given me a bunch of, oh, wow, like pause, things that pause. And I'm hoping for those of you guys listening, you have a couple of those pause moments, because that's one of the reasons why I wanted Justin to come on the show. It's really easy for us to spout off like eat this, not that. Like it's really easy
Mhm.
for us to do that. But as we mentioned, and he mentioned, like the biggest moments that we had are when we thought, when we kind of got and came inside and were like, huh, do I like my life?
Yeah.
Do I want to live on autopilot? Because I know I didn't like my life. My life revolved around my workouts. My life revolved around my food.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Exactly.
And you mentioned, you're like, it was how I looked. I had to look
Mhm.
a certain way.
Yep.
And never did I ask myself, how does my chasing how I looked, how did it make me feel?
Exactly. Right. And who was I living according to?
Yeah.
Whose opinion was I so desperate to have change about me? And I heard of all people, do you remember Jackass, the show
Yeah, yeah,
Jackass?
yeah.
Yeah. So Steve-O, right, is famous for being kind of an idiot.
Yeah.
Right? I saw a clip from him on social media where he was talking about alcoholism. And I've done a
Mm,
couple podcasts recently with coaches who help people stop alcohol socially. They're not alcoholics. They just like
right.
they're leaning on drinking with their friends and they want to back out of that, right? And he had this amazing clip where he was saying, we're taught that alcoholism is a disease.
Hmm.
And he's like, alcohol is not the poison. Our life is the disease. Our life is the
Mm,
poison. We're uncomfortable being alone with our feelings. We're
yeah.
uncomfortable in the way we feel in our own skin. We're reaching for the alcohol in hopes that it will be medicine to cure this situation. So as long as you look at it as this external poison of alcohol has its claws in me and I can't escape the alcohol, you're going to struggle because the truth is you need to rebuild your life in a way that doesn't constantly have you trying to escape it by dissociating with the alcohol.
Right. And the
So
same
it's
could
you have to flip the lens.
And the same could be said, as you say, like I'm escaping something inside. It could be
Yes.
food, sex, drugs, like any of the isms out there, that
Yeah.
addictions out there are me escaping me. And like sitting with yourself. And when I ask women, I'm like, could you just like 5 minutes, just like write down what you're feeling?
Yeah.
You would have thought I would have said, could you walk down your street naked?
Yeah,
I
exactly.
think most of them would have been like, all right, I'll walk down my street naked if they
Yeah.
if they had the choice. Then to
So much
sit down
easier.
for 5 minutes and just be like, just ask yourself, what am I thinking right now?
Hmm.
And they're like, oh. what does that have to do with losing weight? Why would I do
Exactly.
that? And I'm like, and I see, you see it too. Like you see that when people come to you, you see the fixed mindsets. You see the like, this is the only way it has to work. And
Yeah.
you're just like, all right, let's dive in.
Precisely. Right. And I love how you brought up other examples, right? Because alcohol is one. But I use the example of David Goggins. I'm like, listen,
Oh,
for David Goggins, waking up at 5 a.m. and running 100 miles, that's not actually hard for him. That's not the hard work. The hard work is for him to stay at home because he's tired and rest and not let his internal self talk say, you bitch, you're
yeah,
weak as fuck. You're blah, 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 right? Like, what is this guy running from? He's running from demons that he doesn't want to face. So
right,
the hard work is to go internal and not keep running and punishing your body so endorphins are flowing and your stress hormones are spiked and you feel a certain way and you can just avoid this catastrophic low self-worth that you have.
right.
It's like what is actually good for your soul. And then the way that I frame it is like whenever someone comes to me and they say I've tried everything,
Mm,
I help them see the light bulb moment is you've not tried everything, you've tried the same thing with 1,000 different names.
yep.
Because every diet you have ever tried is centered on restriction.
Hmm.
We're either restricting total calories, or we're restricting food fully with intermittent fasting and fasting, or we're restricting all plant foods with carnivore, or we're restricting all carbohydrates with keto, or we're
Hmm.
restricting all meat with vegan, right? And everyone is still centered on this idea of a calorie deficit, of giving
Right.
your body less than it needs. Obese and overweight people are malnourished.
Mm,
We have to replace what they're missing first before they can handle the added stress of some kind of deep caloric restriction, right? So I tell them, you've tried one thing with 1,000 different names. I'm telling you to actually try something different, which is focus on nourishment. I'm going to
right.
give you targets for an amount of food that you need to eat to be healthy, not a restriction.
Mm,
We're going to get rid of the punishing, harmful workouts, and you're going to go for walks every day. So
right.
instead of attempting to get healthy through restriction, sacrifice, scarcity, and self punishment, we're going to try to get healthy through abundance,
Yeah.
nourishment, self love, self care.
Mm.
And it is a radical shift. And it's the only thing they haven't tried.
Yeah. And you're right. Because it's like, I was reading something about like the new year, new me, and it's like if you look at your diet, the only thing that the diet is giving you are foods that you know you should be eating. Like that's
Mhm.
it. Like
Yeah.
no, like no, like there's never going to be every night have a glass of wine. There's never going to be and it's I every day have a cookie, have
Yeah.
ice cream. Like there's never going to be that diet. I mean, if it's
Yeah.
out there, holla at your girl. I want to see it. But every diet is like what we know. Like you look at it, you're like, yeah, I should have more vegetables. Yeah, I should be eating more protein. Yeah, like it's
Exactly.
yeah, I should, but I'm not.
Right.
And then
100%.
what we're saying is ask yourself, why not?
Yes. Ask yourself why not, right? I had another podcast where somebody said to me, they brought up the example of meth. And this guy is like, man, as a kid, I'd watch people do drugs, and there was a lot of people on meth in my area. And I'm like, who would do that to themselves? Why would they know that meth is so terrible? Why would they do that? And that's just a more extreme version on the same spectrum of like, well, and I had to help him. I'm like, listen, if you look at that through an empathetic lens, imagine the way that they feel about themselves internally, the way they
Mm,
feel about their current life that they've built for themselves, where they would put something that harmful into their body in hopes of getting a consciousness experience that's better than the one that they're living. And when I help people use that extreme example of meth, and then we take it to Krispy Kreme donuts or wine or McDonald's or Chick-fil-A or whatever, it's the same thing, man. I'm trying to get people to see this thing of like, you will continually, consistently make poor decisions for yourself. You're not eat like you just said. You kind of know you should be eating single ingredient whole foods. You kind of know you should eat some fruits and veggies. You kind of know you should be drinking clean water, you know? But the
right.
reason why those things don't happen is because you literally don't feel worthy of optimal health and
Mm,
wellness. You don't. You feel worthy of staying down here as an overweight person who's a victim and just can't get themselves out of this current situation. It's just self love. It's always self love.
yeah, I absolutely love this conversation. Like, there, I don't know, Huberman Labs, he does like a 4-hour podcast. Like, this is like, I'm like, now I understand how there could be a 4-hour podcast. I could
Yeah,
talk to,
exactly.
I could talk to you forever. Where can people find you on the socials?
Yeah, everywhere is just at Justin Nault official. And the way I always say, like, it's people always have offers or get this thing for me, whatever. I'm like, listen, go to Instagram, follow at Justin Nault Official, click the message button, and just tell me you heard me on a podcast and tell me what you need. If you want my foods list, I'll give you my foods list. If you want the daily mirror work exercise, I'll give you the daily mirror work exercise. Just tell me what you got going on, and I'll see how I can help you. And we start there. And it's going to be me. It's not a member of my team. You're going to talk directly to me, and I want to hear from you.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. And your supplement company,
Mhm.
Clovis, I will also link that in the show notes there. I
Amazing.
perused through, he's got some great supplements, and the one thing I do like about it is that they're quality supplements. It's not the crap that you'll find buying off of Amazon. So if you're looking for, he has all the basics that you're buying. He has the protein powders. He's got all of the different vitamins that you're looking for, and you're guaranteed that it's not going to be filled with crap.
Totally. Yeah, and just to come full circle, my flagship product, it's podcasts have currently sold me out. It's out of stock right now. But my daily superfood powder is actually a spin off of the baby formula that I created for Savannah nearly 10 years ago now.
Perfect. And so I ask everyone, what's one thing that makes you feel magical?
Freedom, 100%. When
Yeah.
I wake up every day and I know that I am fully in charge of what I'm going to do today, nobody gets to tell me where I need to be, where I should be, what I have to do. I realize that I am the magic that created the life of my dreams.
I absolutely love that. Yeah, like freedom is my like number one core value. And if I don't feel free, I'm like bucking against the system.
Yeah. I'm so glad I met you. I love that. This is
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah.
This is such a great podcast. So, guys, I the one takeaway I want you to take from the show is that yeah, we both can give you food, we can both give you workouts, but it's that inner work. Are you willing to understand what's the driver inside of you? Because I know for me for a long time it was the external stuff that I chased, but it was and once I started doing the internal work, which is hard as fuck, I did. And I got to the point where now things feel effortless. Like I don't no longer feel I feel free. I feel free from food. I feel free from my workouts. I just live my life. So I want that for you. So absolutely follow Justin. If you are looking for quality protein powders, other things, go to his site. All right. Thank you so much for your time today, Justin.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.